Presidential Wealth Management. In the next hour, we're going to attempt to ask an economist the questions that you would ask if you had the chance. But first, a quick look at how that's going to work.
Okay, to start out this segment, I'm going to take you back. I want you to come back with me to the original Star Trek. Not Next Gen, not any of the iterations, but the original Star Trek, okay? And a frequent conversation when Captain Kirk and Dr. McCoy were standing at death's door, they were threatened, and they had to find a solution to their problem in order to save their lives and save everybody's life, save the Earth. And Captain Kirk would push Dr. McCoy, Bones, right? He would push him. I want an answer. How many times did Bones, Dr. McCoy, reply, "Damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a psychiatrist"? Or, these are actual responses. "Damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not an escalator. I'm a doctor, not a mechanic, not an engineer. Damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a coal miner." That came from the original Star Trek. Now let's shift to your life, like now, okay? And you're having a conversation with, let's say, you're a co-worker or your spouse, your husband or your wife or a friend or even your kids. And they're asking you questions about what things are going to do, about which way interest rates are going to go, whether the economy is going to recover. How's your 401k doing? How do we get out of this without losing money? They're asking you all these questions. You're thinking, damn it, I'm a salesman. I'm not an economist, or I'm a dentist or a programmer. I'm a plumber. I'm not an economist. Today, right here on the Eagle's Nest podcast, you get to ask the economist. And we get to welcome back Dr. Michael Busler, economist, public policy analyst, and professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey. Dr. Busler, thank you for subjecting yourself to this punishment, not the first time, but the second time.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Okay, quick question. What's your favorite question that you get from just the common person, everybody, when they find out you're an economist? What question do you get the most often? What's your favorite question?
Well, most people are concerned about their personal situation, so they often ask me about the stock market, which is extremely difficult to forecast. Then they're worried about their job and what their income is going to be going forward. So they ask me the general state of the economy and what I think that'll be going forward.
What's your least favorite question?
Least favorite question is, where do you think I should invest my money now?
We're going to ask you all of them, okay?
That's hard.
Dr. Michael Busler, on this edition of the Eagle's Nest webcast, let's just call it Ask the Economist. I'm Keith Weinman with Taylor Leary from Presidential Wealth Management.
Awesome. This is going to be a lot of fun, and we get round two. So we're going to get back in the cage with Mike Busler here and have some fun with him. And you know what's so amazing is how many times I have referenced our past conversation. So just as a reminder, we had a conversation in early May, and that was on the heels of all of the things that have happened with the COVID situation, and then in the wake of the CARES Act. And just with so much uncertainty in the market and the economy, we were trying to figure out what direction this darn thing's going to go. Is it going to look like a U, a W, a V? The things were all over the place. So I'm excited that we got you back on, and I'm going to hold you to some of those words that you spoke back in May, and we'll have some fun here. But I want to introduce you to just what's going on, how to interact with us, how to make the most out of this experience. So as you're watching at home, you'll have the ability to interact with us. This is, so first way is to do it by the chat feature. The chat feature is going to be private in nature, so the three of us will be able to see it, but it won't be private to the entire audience. So if you have that burning question for Ask the Economist, please use the chat feature to ask your question. And then also there's going to be the offers tab, which is a way to schedule a one-on-one call with one of our advisors here at Presidential to ask your personal questions. If your question is, where do I invest my money? That might actually be more, we might be more adept to answer that question. So at any rate, let's just dive right into it. So I had mentioned that I'm going to hold you to be honest here. And in early May, when we had you on last, you stated, and I quote, "The current situation, while very deep, is not going to last very long." And so far, that statement is absolutely true. We've seen the economy sort of be pretty darn resilient. The stock market's gone to, we're darn near all-time highs. I mean, the NASDAQ has seen all-time highs. We've seen tech just absolutely tear. I mean, all of these things are doing, amazing. And we have to remember that the economy and the stock market are two very different things. However, all of that being said, life in the real world seems to be somewhat normalized, albeit you can't see people smiling or frowning at you because they're covered with masks. So what do you attribute the economic resilience to?
So you recall back in May when you asked me what the recovery would look like. We went through a bunch of letters, V, U, W, L. And I said, I expect the recession to be very short, and I expect a very quick recovery. So a V shape. The economy went down and springs back. At the time, I said the recession will end shortly. I think when all this is said and done, the recession ended at the end of April. It ended at the end of April. May started the recovery and June continued it. What kind of data do I have to support that? In the month of May, we added 2.8 million jobs. That's a record by far. In the month of June, we added 4.6 million jobs, nearly doubling the record. So now critics will point out, yeah, but we're way below where we were, and that's absolutely right. We are below where we are, but the recovery measures how quickly we're coming back. And in 2 months, we've come back significantly. Retail sales dropped about 25%, but in May, they went up 17%. And in June, they went up nearly 8%. We're almost back to where we were before. Look at things like industrial production, the manufacturing index, they're all pointing to large increases. Now, having said that, I was a little worried about July's numbers because, as you know, the virus has flared up again, in fact, worse than it was before in some very key states, Florida, California, Texas, Arizona, and they're starting to shut things down. So I was a little bit worried that maybe the V won't be quite as steep. But this morning, data for the number of people laid off was just slightly higher than last week. Last week was 1.3. This year it's this week rather is 1.4 million. So it doesn't look like the total number of layoffs will be that great, and I don't think it will slow down the recovery. So I'm sticking to what I said in May. I expect a steep, rapid recovery. I'm more optimistic than the vast majority of economists who don't agree with me, by the way, to be fair. Most of them are saying that the economy will lag for a few months until we really see a recovery. The Federal Reserve says the unemployment rate won't drop to below 10% until the end of the year. I think the unemployment rate is going to drop as low below 10% in September. It may even do it in August. So I'm sticking to what I said, and I'm still looking for a quick recovery.
Well, you mentioned, and this is, you were right in one sense, and then again, I had the ability to go back to the tape, so I'll put your feet to the fire here. You said, my hope is that in one day in July, we're going to open the newspapers, which nobody really does that. We're going to open our phones, and it's going to say there were no new cases today. And so we've seen this flare up. And I got this and I got this question from a client. So knowing that you were going to be on this week, I reached out to a couple of clients that I know would be interested in it. And the client said, what I would want to know. All right, so I'm gonna do my best to read this. So right now, as Congress is debating, negotiating, crafting a new COVID-19 relief package. Although the details are not clear, there's one thing that keeps getting thrown around, and that is extending the extra $600 a week of unemployment benefits. As I understand it, the current benefit runs out on 7/25. Do you believe extending the $600 unemployment payment will stave off economic catastrophe, or if we continue it, will it hide the true employment challenges we are facing?
We don't need to extend that. 68% of the unemployed people are making more money being unemployed than being employed. So what is happening is that employers are calling their workers back, and the workers don't want to come back. Now, they could turn them in so you don't get unemployment benefits, but you have a personal relationship with people. They don't do that. I've talked to a dozen, mostly restaurants, that say they just can't get people back because of this. The economy is growing on its own. We don't need any more stimulus. I don't think we need the stimulus package at all. And what I'm afraid of, the deficit before the coronavirus, the deficit this year would have been $1 trillion. The first set of stimulus packages, we spent $3 trillion. Now you're looking at a $4 trillion deficit this year alone. And because the economy was shut down, tax revenue will likely be about 400 to 500 billion below what we budgeted. So we're looking at a deficit right now approaching $5 trillion in 1 year. We can't possibly add any more to the public debt, which started out this year at a total of 23 trillion. The public debt is all the deficits over time added up, was up to 23 trillion. We're adding at least 3-4 more to it, maybe more if they pass a stimulus. That'll take the public debt up to 28, 29 trillion. Now, is that a problem? Practically every economist will say, if the public debt is less than 1 year's GDP, it probably is not a problem. If it goes above that, it's likely to be a problem. This year's GDP will be a little over 20 trillion. And we're talking about running up deficits of 26, 28 trillion. Can't do it. We absolutely can't do it. And the stimulus is not needed. The economy is on its way back. What they passed already, in my view, is good enough. Let me just say one more thing about that. Economically, we don't need the stimulus. Politically, everybody's going to vote for the stimulus because it's an election year. Both Congress and the president, both parties want to say, look, we're very sensitive to the needs of Americans and we don't want anybody to get hurt. So we're going to pass this stimulus, and it was my idea, so vote for me. So politically, it will be passed. Economically, it's not needed.
So that said, if the debt goes to 28 trillion and the GDP is 20 trillion, you said that's where most economists say that becomes a problem. Define the problem. How does that become a problem? What's problematic about it? What happens?
So a couple of things. Number one, the biggest thing is when we borrow money, there's no mechanism in place to ever pay the money back. We borrow money with no idea and no intention of ever paying it back. So what happens? They sell 10 or 20-year bonds. They pay interest every year. When the bond matures, we're running a deficit anyway. We can't pay it back. So we sell new bonds to pay off the old bonds. You roll over the debt, and it just keeps going up. So what's the problem with that? One, you have to pay interest on it every year. Even though interest rates are rock bottom, it's still 300 to 400 billion a year and growing. That's money that we can't use for all the programs that we'd like to use it for. The other thing is, if the federal government keeps borrowing money in these financial markets, it leaves less for business available to business to borrow. We haven't seen it yet, but it is possible business could get crowded out of these markets and not be able to raise capital to expand.
So I'm thinking to myself, as the average person, how do I feel that? Now, you've indicated that as the interest on the debt compounds, it has to be paid. There's less money to spend for things that government spends things on. So many questions pop into my head there. What things go first? And then also, after that list of a couple, if you would please, you say business is crowded out. And what jumps into my head immediately, by being crowded out, that means rates go up?
Eventually, rates are going to go up. The Federal Reserve can't keep the rates down like this forever. So they will go up, and just market forces alone will drive up interest rates, in addition to what the Federal Reserve is doing. Keith, you made a very excellent point there. How does the average person feel this, the debt and the deficit? And the answer is, the average person doesn't feel it. That's why it doesn't bother them when people say, oh, the government's going to borrow some more money. It doesn't affect me any. However, we have to pay the interest. They're going to have to raise taxes to be able to pay the interest. At some point, I'm assuming they're going to try to balance the budget. And in order to do that, you're going to have to raise taxes or cut spending. Both of those are very difficult to do. We can't continue to run these deficits forever, especially the size we're looking at. We can't continue to do that forever. We've got to put a stop to that and get close to balancing the budget.
How does the government cut spending in a manner that we will see as the average person without going after the untouchables, the entitlements?
So the answer is we can't do that. So what do we have to do? About 62% of the budget, roughly, goes to these entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and a few other things. About 10% of the budget goes to interest on the public debt. So now we're up to 72% we said we can't really touch. That doesn't leave much that we can touch. What's left over, about half of it goes for the defense, roughly. Half goes to the defense budget and half goes for social programs. In the sequester passed in 2011, the deal was made for every dollar we increase or cut in government spending, you have to match in defense spending rather, it has to be matched with domestic spending. So President Trump said the military has been decimated, we have to build it up. So they agreed to do that, but to do that, they had to agree to increases in domestic spending, which is why we had $1 trillion this year deficit before we even started. So how do we get it down? There is no good answer to that question. There's no good answer to how we get the deficit down. So if you can't have a good answer, the next best thing is what answer is the least bad. What they're going to have to do, and nobody's going to like this, the only thing that I think makes sense, you're going to have to raise the retirement age and the age for Medicare up to at least 70 and probably a little bit higher. People are living a lot longer today. When they put Social Security in 1935, you collected at 65, the life expectancy was 67. They collected for 2 years. Today, they raised their retirement age somewhat up to 66 or eventually 67. But people are living, the IRS sent me something, Social Security sent me something and said, at your age group, you're likely to live to be about 84 or 85 years old. Some people I see living to be well into their 90s. Some people live over 100. You can't possibly start collecting at 65 or 66 and expect to collect for the next 30, 35 years. So nobody wants their benefits cut. And I understand that politically, that's a disaster. I wouldn't touch the benefits of anybody collecting now or anybody as they retire in the next few years. But starting with people who are under 60, let's raise the retirement age and the age to collect Medicare. Eventually, it's going to have to go to at least 70 and probably higher than that. That's the only way we're going to be able to balance this budget, in my opinion.
As a financial planner and the millennial in the group, at almost 35 years old, when I look at financial planning and retirement planning, that is something that I usually discount to a great degree. The numbers that I run for my clients that are in or near retirement right now that are in their 60s, I mean, I'm discounting that 60-70% for myself and other folks that are in my age demographic. So I think that that's spot on. So With that said, though, there's a lot of changes that could occur, and we hear about whether left or right or center or wherever is what could we spend that money, and they constantly are talking about these social programs and how we need to kind of keep feeding them. I mean, at what point do we kind of have to burn it down to build it back up?
So I'm a free market economist. My view is, if you really want to help people that are low income, because there's a big income inequality problem, you don't solve that problem by taking income away from people that earned it and give it to people who, for whatever reason, didn't earn it. That's what the Great Society, Lyndon Johnson, started in the 60s. It hasn't reduced poverty at all. And in my opinion, it's slowing economic growth. Instead of giving people free stuff, and I don't think that people really want the free stuff. They take it because they don't have a choice, but they don't really want it. I think they want exactly what President Trump has given them: opportunity to earn enough income to pay for their own health insurance, pay for their own food so they don't need food stamps, pay for their own housing so they don't need Section 8 allowances. So if we get the economy going, as we're trying to do now, and what President Trump did for minorities, especially the African American and the Hispanic, unemployment rates were at historic lows prior to this coronavirus. Once we get those numbers down, there will be no need to spend money on these social programs. So get the economy going, give opportunity to everyone. If you want to spend money on education or training programs so people can learn a skill and do something, I'm all for that. You can use my tax dollars for that, and I'm very happy. What bugs me is when, and a lot of people I talk to, when you work so hard and you finally have made a little bit of money, and I waited till July 15th to do my taxes, because every time I do it, I get heartburn for a week. I take a look at how much I paid in federal income tax, how much I paid in Social Security tax, how much I paid in Medicare tax, how much I paid in sales tax to the state, how much I paid in property taxes locally, how much I paid in gasoline and alcohol taxes, which I don't even know what they are. So you take a look at all the taxes you pay, and you start saying, who am I working for here? So I would keep tax rates low. That'll stimulate growth in the economy. Tax revenue will actually go up by keeping the rates lower. Arthur Laffer came through with this theory years ago, and give people opportunity to earn income for themselves so they don't need to rely on the government. The federal government has trapped people for a lifetime. In some cases, generations have been trapped into this welfare where they depend on the government, and they're afraid really to go out and try to earn money because they're going to lose all these benefits. We need to fix that. We need to get people to feel more in control of their own lives, have more individual freedom and more individual responsibility, in my view, rather than social responsibility.
So I think that's super fascinating. I'm glad that you kind of touched on that. And right now, I guess in the wake of all of this, and as summer started to hit its peak, we saw the Black Lives Matter movement have a massive resurgence. I believe it was from 2016, and now we're seeing a lot of discussions, and it seems to be much more broad-based with in 2020 than it was in 2016, and we're starting to see really the stories and kind of unearthing that, and maybe some social consciousness, creating awareness. And I liked what you said, and that was that it sometimes feels like, and I see this a lot, is that if we're going to bring up another group, then it's at the sacrifice of somebody else. And instead of that, having that kind of that closed-mindedness, I really liked where you were going there, and that is, instead of having the scarcity mindset, let's have an abundance mindset and actually grow the pie bigger, because that is absolutely possible. And so you keep talking about, hearing about these social programs in the face of the minority interests. And I totally recognize that we're in a world of inequality, and I'd like to think, as a proud American, that we everybody has the same opportunity to have that American dream. So what can we do, and I mean that as a population, do to help our minority brethren to raise them up is it through social programs, or is it something that maybe the business community can do from the perspective of economics?
I'm an educator. I believe education is the way out of poverty. Look, my parents were immigrants. You know, we were very low income. We used to call them poor back then. We were low income, and I educated my way out of it. And that's how it has to be done. Reverend Jesse Jackson has been saying that for years. We need to educate your way out of this. So you have a skill and you know how to do something and you can contribute to the economy. That's the key. So any education program, any way we can help people to acquire skills. Because remember, in our system, in theory, you're paid according to the value of your output. So the more you contribute, the more you get paid. The low income people, with all due respect, are in a position where they're not able to contribute. Let's get them in a position where they can contribute. That way we have an income inequality problem, but you don't solve it by bringing the top down and giving it to these guys. Keep the top going where they're going. Just the lower income, give them the opportunity to rise up. And that's really the way out of this thing, not just giving them free stuff.
The last 2 points go to this question. Keep the top rising, and your comments about taxes. I have to go to the fact that Joe Biden, the challenging candidate, has said he would raise $750 billion, $770 billion, for basically more entitlements and giveaways, but things that would support people and things that would, quote, help. Would it really help? You said just here, keep the top rising because it generates growth and growth generates taxes. When asked how to pay for that $750 billion, Biden says, raise taxes. When asked where, he points to things that would eliminate, for example, the 1031 exchanges of real estate and annuities, which allow people to make an investment and then move their money to a similar investment to keep their money growing, and eventually then take advantage of the long-term gains tax rate, which is very low. But the plan of eliminating the 1031 exchanges on real estate, as Biden points out, would virtually eliminate the long-term capital gains tax for a tax that would be much higher and would be paid along the way. And editorial comment here would be discouraging to those with means to invest in things that would eventually generate taxes, generate capital, and raise more taxes. So what if that were to happen? What if the election were to occur and that plan were to be put into place?
He also wants to raise the corporate tax rate from President Trump and Congress in 2018 lowered it to 21%. He wants to raise the corporate tax rate up to 28%, saying, look, I'm going to tell you, you should pay more. You can afford to pay more. You have an obligation to pay more, and you should pay more. That would be a disaster. Look, it's not that complicated. There are two basic inputs into the economy, capital and labor. We have sufficient labor. What we need to do, especially since we have a capital intensive economy, is to create more capital. Raising tax rates on investors and raising the corporate tax rate would destroy capital formation. That would tend, or at least reduce capital formation. That would tend to stagnate the economy. He also believes that higher tax rates generate more tax revenue. That's not always true either. And people point out to me, well, you know, President Trump lowered taxes in 2018, and that's going to cause the deficit to go up by $1.5 trillion. The truth is, the tax cut did not add 1 penny to the deficit, not 1 penny to the deficit. Now, why do I say that? We took in more tax revenue in 2018 than we did in 2017. Had lowered the rates, but it increased economic activity. You have a lower rate times a bigger base, you generated more dollars. Not a whole lot more, but at least it went up. 2019, we raised more tax revenue than 2018. So the tax cut did not add one penny. It increased capital formation, which is what we need. Now, the Democrats say back to that, well, you're just giving a tax break to the wealthy. We're giving a tax break to anybody who has accumulated capital and would like to see the capital grow, as was pointed out, to see the capital grow and have the economy expand. We would go into a stagnation similar to the Obama Biden stagnation of 8 years if they raise taxes like that.
Is that similar at all to what happened to Japan, a decade ago?
Yeah. Now, they have a whole lot of other circumstances, but any place you look at it, raising the tax rates will tend to slow economic growth. And we've been stagnant for so long, we need growth. So we need this economic growth. You know, we haven't had a 4% annual growth rate in 20 years. In year 2000 was the last year we had 4% growth rate. That's when people start to feel economic prosperity. When the economy is growing, college graduates have a couple of good offers. Somebody doesn't like their job. They know there's other jobs available. That's what prosperity brings, and that's what we need. That's what President Trump is trying to do, even though everybody seems to be fighting him. That's what he's trying to do, bring prosperity back to the U.S., bring the high growth, and that will benefit everybody. John Kennedy said the rising tide lifts all boats.
So when we look at kind of what's going on right now, and especially in the wake of COVID, we've seen the tech industry just absolutely drive the market's returns right now. You look at, Disney, some of the, Coca-Cola, their earnings are absolutely dismal. And, with Disney, they're not going to really open up their theme parks, and a lot of their revenue streams are not there, which serve a lot of people from an employment perspective. Right now, I just saw that in May, there was 3.9 there's 3.9 people per job opening. Now, again, looking at it from that perspective, that's May numbers. We don't really know what they look like for July because they're so far in arrears. But with that being said, how do you feel that tech is driving today's market and economy at the same time? And what can we rely on that, because we are becoming more efficient with our technology?
So what the technology does, efficiency is the key word. A lot of these software as a service companies can show other companies how to use the software to operate much more efficiently. And that's really where things are going in the future. The manufacturing, even if we bring manufacturing back, particularly from China, which I think is going to happen, the reason we lost it to China in the first place was their labor costs are so low. At one time, they were at $1 a day. They're higher than that now, but still much less than what the labor costs are here. So we bring the manufacturing back, but it's not a labor-intensive operation. We bring it back as a capital-intensive operation. What does that mean? We have robots on the production line, artificial intelligence, automation. So instead of needing 100 people in a factory, you only need 10 people and 90 robots in there doing it. Now, people worry, well, what's going to happen to all the jobs? These are new jobs that are coming, and they'll require less labor. And frankly, although we're worried about now all the unemployment stuff, a year or so from now, we're going to start to talk about labor shortages. Once the economy gets back to where it should be, and I don't think we're more than a year or so away to a real healthy growth economy, we're going to start to run into labor shortage problems, and it'll be a good thing that we're doing some of these things capital intensive. It'll also be a good thing that we lowered the corporate tax rate to create capital. In my opinion, we should also lower the capital gains rate back to 15%. That would create more capital too. Recall in the late 1997, Bill Clinton lowered the capital gains tax rate from 28 to 20%. Total tax revenue skyrocketed. The economy grew at a 4.5% annual rate for the next 4 years. Not only did we balance the budget, Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House and he controlled spending, we had surpluses in the budget. So I would recommend reducing the capital gains tax rate back to 15%. Let's get the economy going again, create a lot of capital. There's going to be jobs for everybody as all this, for everybody that's well prepared. So you have to be educated and prepared for these jobs. But once you are, there'll be plenty of jobs for everybody, I think.
Let's get dreamy for a minute here, if we can. I'm curious your thoughts about a discussion that I've picked up on that's kind of like, all over the place lately. And that is the big giant tech stocks. Are they overvalued, or are they undervalued when you consider the influence they'll have on the future? Things that we're unaware of with regard to technologies, efficiencies that we're unaware of with regard to what they're working on right now. And I go back to something we mentioned a couple of weeks ago here. It said that Tesla is working on a million-mile battery for a car. Not a battery that you charge once and drive a million miles, but a battery that lasts. You can recharge and use it for a million miles. But there are so many things like that. In fact, you can use Tesla as an example. Some say the price is ridiculous now. Others say no. If you say that, you're looking at Tesla as a car company that's bigger than the other car companies all combined now in their capital worth. But Tesla is more than that. Tesla is going to influence the ways we use technology on so many levels that we're totally unaware of down the road, a decade, 2 decades down the road. Well, that's what investors are all about, investing in something now that they feel will be of greater value several years from now. What are your thoughts on the value of the big tech companies and what lies ahead for us if we do it right?
I don't think they're overvalued. As you point out, when someone buys a stock, the price they're willing to pay depends on a number of things, but it depends primarily on the future earnings or their anticipation of the future earnings of the companies. Tesla is more than a car company, and they're doing so many more things. Electricity is the future for energy and for using a lot of things, and Tesla just keeps coming up with new ideas. I think he's got a roof shingle that is a solar panel. It looks just like a regular roof shingle, and it will collect solar energy that way, and it looks okay. So I don't know, some of the things that these guys can come up with. You're dealing with very intelligent people who are very creative, and with enough capital, they can do almost anything. I watched when that rocket ship landed a few months ago, and they pinpointed an exact spot, and the thing came right down, and we can use it again. I mean, that was science fiction only a year or so ago. So having done that, I think there's some marvelous things they can do. Investors are betting that Tesla is going to come up with a lot more things and be extremely profitable into the future. And I think they're right.
Can you identify anything that is not an industry that will flourish, but that may be an industry that will flounder if it doesn't reinvent itself?
The whole energy sector. There's only so long we can keep using these fossil fuels for a number of reasons. We seem to have an adequate supply now. Now, the environmentalists would like us to stop using them. Some of them, I think, in a matter of 10 years, which I don't think is going to happen. But those industries are going to have to start to look to some other ways to generate revenue. The traditional fossil fuels we're going to start using less and less of. So those industries are going to have to reinvent themselves and look for different ways to generate revenue.
So earlier, or when you were on last time, you said, January and February were slated. January was one of the best months that we'd ever seen, and February, up until basically February 23rd, was on fire, and it was on pace to do just as well, if not better. And you were saying that this might have been our 4% year. So what is it going to take for us to get back to that level, and when do you expect that time frame to be?
Well, because we dropped down so sharply in this recession this year, and the recovery is coming back quickly, I think we could see a 4% annual growth by next year. I think the third quarter number and the fourth quarter number will look pretty good. By then, we'll have the economy on a pretty good footing. I'm hoping, and I'm not a medical professional, so I don't know, but I'm hoping there are 3 or 4 vaccines which could get approval as early as September or October. President Trump is so sure they're going to get approved, he's ordered billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of doses, which will be free to Americans. So it could be by November, December, these vaccines are out into the hands of the public. Now, again, I'm not a medical professional. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's some of the information that I get. Once that's put behind us and people feel confident that if I get a vaccine, I'm going to be okay. Consumers have plenty of money to spend thanks to the stimulus. Everybody will be back to work, or at least many people will be back to work by the end of the year. And I see some real strong growth next year. Perhaps we hit that 4% growth next year.
In an environment like that, 4% growth, describe that economy. Jobs, various types of businesses, prices, inflation.
So what we have to worry about when you get to a higher growth economy is too much demand in the economy and some inflation. The Federal Reserve is very keen on watching that. I think they sometimes acted a little too quickly. You may recall from the end of 2016 to the end of 2018, they raised interest rates 8 times. Just when the economy was set to take off, the Federal Reserve puts the brakes on. So they're very keen, and I think they'll any sign of inflation, they'll act very quickly to quell that. But as long as there is sufficient capital and enough labor, we can expand without creating or causing much inflation. And I think that's what we're going to see next year. Now, again, you have to be careful and watch inflation. If commodity prices start to go up, we're going to have to watch that a little bit. We don't want to overheat the economy, but we do want to heat it. So we do want the economy to grow. We just don't want it to get overheated. And I think we're poised next year to be good, assuming Congress doesn't start raising taxes and doing some other things next year.
So right now we're seeing this interesting situation in the markets, and you don't see this very often. And a lot of the times you buy one asset because it offsets another. You know, the lack of correlation between, you know, as an example, stocks and bonds. So in this particular year, you know, we're looking at large caps have done quite well. They rebounded, I mean, massive off the bottom in the end of March. Bonds, investment grade bonds, have done quite well as well. They're kind of that flight to safety. But then we look at some of the commodities. Now, let's just use gold as my metric for success here. And gold has done insanely well. So you're seeing massive public debt. You're seeing the stock market rebound really, really nicely. Bonds are doing pretty darn well here in light of everything. What gives?
So it depends who's right. So I think the people that are buying gold are very fearful that this is not going to last. We're going to hit a big bubble with the stocks and the stock market's going to crash. If that's the case, I better go to the safety of gold. And there are a lot of people, I think, that believe that. There are probably more people that think the opposite, that think the economy is going to come back and corporate profits will go up. And as a result of that, the bonds are safe investment, corporate bonds and stocks, because corporate profits will go up. So the price of stocks should go up too. So you have investors with a couple different views, and they're going to where they think is the best return. We'll see who's right as time goes on.
Here's one. I can't resist this. For those of us, I don't think this is Taylor, but it might be you and me.
Are we going boomer here?
Yeah, boomer.
Boomer, okay.
Okay, boomer.
Those old guys in there.
Yeah, this is for the old people. We still got cable, okay? We're still connected, and we're watching what you call regular TV, okay? And we see these commercials. The economy is going to crash. You're going to lose your retirement savings. Buy this book, call this number now, and we'll tell you how, whatever. And it goes on and on. But all hell's going to break loose. We are headed for a disaster. You ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to a crash. So buy this book.
Yep. So during bad times, with a lot of uncertainty, which is what we have today, it's very easy to sell these kinds of things. I know some people I've talked with that are depressed about what's been going on, very anxious and very fearful. This virus is going to overtake us. The economy is going to crash. People are going to have to go back into our houses for another 6 weeks. This is all awful. There's nothing. I'm worried I'm going to catch it and die. So with all that bad feeling, it's very easy to say, hey, you know all this stuff you're feeling? Well, it's right. The market's going to crash. Buy my book or buy the crash-proof method of investing. So I think it's just a sign of the times. I think once the economy starts to grow and people are back, more people are back to work and their incomes are going up, and we've got this virus at least under control. I don't know if we're going to eliminate it quickly, but at least get it under control, and people feel more confident. Some of these negative doomsdayers, I think, are going to have a lot of trouble. And consumer confidence is really a key here. It was sky high the last 3.5 years, and that's really what led the economy to do so well. So there is somewhat of a question, how will consumers react once the economy is fully open and stays open? Will they still be a little apprehensive and reduce spending, or will they go out and start spending again? I believe that consumers have been locked up for so long, they're ready to go out and start spending. And I think because the retail sales numbers in particular and total overall consumption also were up relatively high.
Quickly then, where would, from an economist's point of view, where would we be right now if COVID-19 had not happened? And was it handled as well as it could have been?
So had it not happened, I think we would have hit our first 4% growth year since 2000. Now, was it handled properly? That's an opinion. It depends who you're talking to, too. My view is, I think, I'm a strong Trump supporter, so let me say that ahead of time, and there might be some bias there. But I think the president handled this well. He was told in January the virus came from people who flew in from China. So we stopped people flying in from China. On February 29th, which was a leap year this year, recall, February 29th, Dr. Fauci said you have to declare a national emergency. The next day, Trump declares a national emergency. On March 14th, Fauci said we really need to shut the economy down. March 15th, Trump shuts the economy down. So he listened to his best expert and did what they said. Now, Trump thought we had a nice supply of all this protective equipment. Turns out we didn't. So in a matter of a short time period, he starts making, and he used the private sector to do this, we started making more masks than we know what to do with now. I mean, there's I've got probably 50 masks sitting down there. So we all have plenty of masks. Governor Cuomo was saying, we're going to run out of ventilators. We need 30,000 ventilators and people are going to die. So President Trump said, I'm not going to have the government do this. Let the private enterprise people do this. We'll give them some incentives or even force them to do it if we have to. All of a sudden, we've got more ventilators than we know what to do with. Nobody has ever suffered from not having a ventilator, and we now are starting to ship them overseas. So the president had to make a tough choice. If I shut the economy down early, we could go into a severe recession and maybe worse. If I wait too late, the virus could take a lot of lives, and that's bad too. So he tried to find a spot in the middle that would minimize total losses. I think he did about the best job that you can do. There's so many unknowns here. He had to weigh everything. He came up with the decision. I think he did a good job.
So as an educator, right now, we're looking at, the buyback, let's go back to school. Kids are, school shopping again. Are they just school shopping to, sit at home and kind of virtually learn? And my follow-up question to that is obviously your boots are on the ground from the university perspective. If let's say they don't go back to school and we have to do this protracted period of at home or virtual learning, do you think that there's going to be a lag effect from a education perspective that we might see in 5 to 10 years from now?
Or sooner? Yes, I do. So from a mental health standpoint, these young kids especially have got to get back to school. You've got to start mingling, get a sense of community, start to really learn. Again, we've got to get these kids back, otherwise we're going to have some long-term damage. Now, higher education, colleges and universities, they have to make a decision too. Most of them seem to be leaning toward staying online or some kind of a hybrid format where you have some in class and some online. From my perspective, I'd like to get back to the classroom as quickly and safely as possible. With me, I teach courses, both undergraduate and graduate. The undergraduate, you can sort of handle those online because you're really sort of giving them something, they understand it and take a test on it. The graduate classes are not like that. We assume you already learned this, so now we're going to concentrate on application. So I don't give exams, they're all case studies. So here's what we learned this week. Remember this. We bring up a case study, and for a 3-hour class, I spend the first hour discussing the case study. There's active learning that occurs during that time period that I think is extremely beneficial. Now, they said, well, you can do that on Zoom. Well, it doesn't really work quite as well on Zoom. It's not bad, but you really need that face-to-face interaction in the classroom to really stimulate what we call active learning, and that will benefit the students the most. I'd like to get back to the classroom as quickly as we possibly can.
You are, in addition to being an economist, you're also a public policy analyst. And so I can't resist sneaking in a question about things that have affected the young generation now, not the graduate students, but the kids in school or not in school. Different habits, life changes, things that will disappear, new things that will appear because habits have to be changed. As a public policy analyst, do you see any dramatic changes in the way we do things down the road as that generation that I was talking about ages?
The younger generation is very technologically savvy. And it's easy for them to use. I mean, even as young as 4 and 5 years old, they're using computers and iPads and things. So one thing we saw during this pandemic, everybody had to go home and work. A lot of people can get more work done at home than they can in an office. So I think you're going to see some changes in the way people work. And you'll see people that will not be in an office every day, working from a remote location, and use technology to do that. 2 of my kids work for technology startup companies, and they can work anywhere. They're on their laptop and they can be anywhere, and they get the job done. I think you're going to see more of that, and particularly with the younger generation, that's going to seem very matter of fact to them. So when they start working, if the company says you have to be here 9 to 5, 5 days a week, they're going to start to scratch their head and say, what kind of an old-fashioned company is this? We don't do things like that anymore. So you'll see some changes like that. It's a little early to tell how long-lasting they'll be, but there will be changes, significant changes.
Dr. Busler, are you okay for just a few more minutes here?
And I'm good.
Okay, Taylor needs to explain how people can take advantage of some of the things that we've talked about here today. And then I want to come back and check with you before I let people know how they can reach you directly to perhaps answer their questions. Taylor.
Yeah, so this has been, again, an eye-opening experience and just a lot of knowledge, and we really appreciate you taking the time. You had talked about in the beginning, people asking you about, where to put their money. And so if you're having that question and really trying to understand what to do in today's market, there's stocks, there's bonds, there's cryptocurrency, there's all of these things that are out there. And it can be a very confusing mess. And so it's our job to provide insights and guidance to help you get to the place that you want to be from a financial perspective. And we use the knowledge and tools that Dr. Busler has presented today. And those are some of the resources that we have at our fingertips. So if you want to connect with us, use the offers feature, click on that. You'll be directed to our website, schedule a 15-minute call with one of our advisors, and then we can take the next step that is most suited for you. So again, Dr. Busler, thank you so much for being on today and fielding our fastball of questions.
Well, Dr. Busler is a professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey. You can find his current columns on Newsmax, Town Hall, The Western Journal, and Laura Ingram's Life Zet. And Dr. Busler, I want to ask you for any final thoughts that might be most important to people, to leave people with, and also how we can contact you and perhaps get some questions to answers that we wouldn't get anywhere else. No, answers to questions that we wouldn't.
Okay.
There we go.
We got it. What I'd like to say to everybody is don't be so down about all this. We will get through this and we will come out strong. So just take it one day at a time. Do what you have to do. Wear the mask if you have to wear the mask. And I recommend people doing that. That seems to be working. Practice what our experts tell us and just hang in there and don't worry about all this bad news. It's going to start getting much, much better. I think in September and October, we're going to get filled with very good economic news and good news about this virus, and we'll be able to put this behind us. And if you want to read what I've been writing, my Twitter account is @mbusler. That's @mbusler. If you're on Facebook, I have a page called Funding Democracy. So just search it and you can see all my columns. And at the very least, you can Google my name and everything will come up.
Dr. Busler, as Taylor said, thank you so much. Let's do it again. And
thank you.
Really, we so appreciate your insight, one that we wouldn't have.
It was my pleasure to be here and to chat with both you and Taylor Keith. I look forward to doing it again.
Thank you. We'll see you again. And we'll look forward to seeing you again on the Eagle's Nest podcast from Presidential Wealth Management. Feel free to send us your program ideas and or questions about your investments to go on the web, go to our website. Best thing to do. You can get our email address there and our website. Just go to Presidential Wealth Management or just presidentialwm.com.
Group Inc., a registered broker-dealer, member FINRA and SIPC.